So something really lovely happened this week. And while it was quite pervasive, my sense is that most people experienced it differently than I did. Amid the upset of these last 4 weeks, a time when many of us have walked around with a pit in our stomachs and sort of doubled down on news reports to stay tuned to what's happening, there was something much lighter, playful, and fun. You may have guessed that I'm talking about Halloween. According to the History Channel, Halloween's origins date back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. The Celts, who lived 2,000 years ago, mostly in the area that is now Ireland or United Kingdom and northern France, celebrated their new year on November the 1st. This day marked the end of summer and the harvest and the beginning of the dark, cold winter, a time of year that was often associated with death. Celts believe that on the night before the new year, the boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead became blurred. And on the night of October 31st, they celebrated Samhain, when it was believed that the ghosts of the dead returned to earth. In addition to causing trouble and damaging crops, Celts thought that the presence of these otherworldly spirits made it easier for Celtic priests to make predictions about the future. For a people entirely dependent on the volatile natural world, these prophecies were a really important source of comfort during the long, dark winter. To commemorate the event, Druids built huge sacred bonfires where the people gathered to burn crops and animals as sacrifices to the Celtic deities. And during the celebration, the Celts wore costumes, typically consisting of animal heads and skins, and attempted to tell each other's fortunes. When the celebration was over, they relit their hearth fires, which they had extinguished earlier that day, and from the sacred bonfire, they took the flame to help protect them during the coming winter. By the year 43, Roman Empire had conquered the majority of Celtic territory, and in the course of 400 years that they ruled the Celtic lands, 2 festivals of Roman origin were combined with the traditional Celtic celebration. So there was a day when the Romans traditionally commemorated the passing of the dead, and then to celebrate the dead, there was a goddess of fruit and trees. The symbol of Pomona is the apple. An incorporation of this celebration into Samhain, it probably explains the tradition of bobbing for apples that was practiced at so many Halloween parties before we knew better. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III designated November 1st as a time to honor All Saints. Soon, All Saints' Day incorporated some of the traditions of Samhain, and the evening before was known as All Hallows' Eve, the latter Halloween. So over time, Halloween evolved into this day of activities like trick-or-treating, carving jack-o'-lanterns, festive gatherings, donning costumes, and of course, eating treats. There are some Jewish people who do not celebrate Halloween. This is because of the holiday's origins as a pagan festival with added Catholic connection. Some Jewish people consider the holiday as edging into the world of idolatry. That being said, most American Jewish families recognize Halloween much the same way that they do Thanksgiving and the 4th of July as national holidays without religious connection and a day to celebrate. Who wouldn't like a day with free candy, costumes, and spookiness? In fact, did you know that 1/4 of all the candy sold annually in the US is purchased for Halloween? And while I am one who breaks out in a rash when having to come up with a costume, and I shake my head at the mere suggestion of having to decorate my home for anything, I am all in when it comes to Halloween. Consider for a moment how sweet and wonderful Halloween is. 1 night a year, just one, all over our country and in countries around the world, children get dressed up in costume, many of which are homemade projects they've been working on for weeks. They put down their iPads and disconnect from their video games and their phones, and they leave their house. They walk outside in their neighborhoods and other communities with their families, and they go knocking on doors of people they know and most of whom they do not know, and they're greeted with kind offers of candy and treats. And on the other side of that door, generous citizens who plan in advance purchasing candy, which is not inexpensive, and they eagerly pop up from the couch to kindly hand out goodies to unknown visitors who knock on their door after dark. And if you're like us, in my house, getting just a few small groups of kids, we then lament the fact that we don't get to give out candy to more people. This happens on no other day of the year. It is a night that the joy of giving and receiving is pervasive and at its best. It's a night when we branch out beyond our usual paths and the familiar faces of those we know and eagerly knock on doors and answer the door when total strangers come knocking. It's a night when we demonstrate a level of trust in each other that is nowadays very hard to come by. It is a night when our differences and divisions may not dissolve, but at least they are on mute, so we can enjoy one another to the fullest. And enjoy we do, in what feels like a sweet and simple and pure way. On Halloween, it doesn't matter which political party we align with, what religion we practice, what our cultural or ethnic group we belong to, what our gender or sexual orientation is. The differences that we so often allow to create a barrier for connection between us just doesn't come into play. And it is so refreshing and delightful. We all just want to enjoy and create enjoyment for others. This week's Torah portion reminds us of this spirit of giving and receiving, the essence of hospitality that is very much at play on Halloween. In Parshat Vayera, we read, "The Lord appeared by the terebinths of Mamre. Abraham was sitting by the entrance of his tent as the day grew hot. Looking up, he saw 3 men standing near him, and as soon as he saw them, he ran from the entrance of his tent to greet them, and bowing to the ground, he said, 'My lords, if it please you, do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought. Let me fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves.'" It's like biblical trick-or-treating. Our text teaches that Abraham and Sarah make cakes and serve a lovely meal to the visiting passersby and extend themselves in ways that are gracious and generous and kind. And the blessing that our ancestors received from one of the men is that Sarah will bear a child, something seemingly impossible at Abraham and Sarah's advanced ages. Abraham goes out of his way to welcome the strangers. As Torah depicts, Abraham knows nothing about the travelers, and they do not know our patriarch or matriarch. The giving and receiving emerges from a place of trust in the stranger, of assumed good intentions, even when it was probably dangerous to do so. Something that also feels hard to do right now, even for many of us, that may seem unsafe to do right now. And so that is why this year, not in spite of what has been happening for the last 4 weeks in Israel and Gaza, in this country, around the world, but rather even more so because of it. The blessing of being able to open our doors and extend sweetness to trick-or-treaters, and the ability to send our kids to knock on the doors of strangers who live near us or maybe not so near us, those who want to give them treats and feels especially sweet and special. I pray that before too long, the fear and uncertainty that have been so thick and difficult will give way to calm, kindness, trust, and peace. Shabbat Shalom.